Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 7th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the way too early NFL mock draft 1.0, the top 10 picks in the first round of the NFL draft. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NBA as we take a trip around the world of American sports. We're going to start in basketball. Jimmy Butler has had quite the saga. We talked a little bit about it last week when we covered it on our show on Friday, but now we're going to talk about places where he could end up after all this drama with him being suspended for 7 games and definitely not returning to the Miami Heat. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful, Tuesday, January 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NBA talk for today with Jimmy Butler. Where could Jimmy Butler end up? There are plenty of rumors for where he's potentially trying to end up with. Plenty of teams that are on his list, teams that are pursuing him, teams that I think would just be a good fit. But I want to knock off a couple teams that are in rumors surrounding him right now. A couple teams that are out there that I've heard that just don't make any sense to me at all as far as trading, whether that be because of timeline, because of assets. I just don't see it happening. And we're going to start off with the one that I've seen a lot. The Los Angeles Lakers. Doesn't make any sense. Not because they wouldn't fit well. In fact, it'd be a very good fit if they could get it done, but the assets they would have to give up to get it done just does not make any sense. They'd have to give up about 5 or 6 players to make the money work. Acquiring $48 million is not easy, especially when your roster is as top-heavy as the Lakers roster is. Now, that's not to say it's impossible, but the Lakers have already made their move. They shed a lot of money when they were able to get rid of that D'Lo contract, instead turning him in for Dorian Finney-Smith and a couple of other guys, right? That was their big move. They're probably going to sit pretty at the deadline. I don't see the Lakers being too active, especially in a big name situation like Jimmy Butler's. Another one that I've heard a lot that I just think doesn't make any sense is the Rockets, right? The Rockets are an incredibly young and talented team. Now, they do have the ability to make the money work, but that would be admitting that, hey, we're going to get rid of one of our talented guys. You can get rid of a guy like Fred VanVleet, but you still need about another $10 million to go with that. You'd have to get rid of some of your younger guys that are there and showing up and showing out. Now, in a 3-team trade, potentially, but I just don't think it fits the timeline at all for the Rockets to go out and get a guy like Jimmy Butler. They're a young team that's not really in their championship window yet. I know with the emergence of Victor Wembanyama, a lot of teams in the West are saying we need to go all in now, but the Rockets, if they do that, I think it's a mistake, and I just can't see the Rockets pulling off a desperation move like that, especially with how good their season is going right now. Another team that I haven't really heard, but is generally a part of these conversations, is the Thunder, right? The Thunder have all the assets. They don't need Jimmy Butler, though. They're a young team. They're not going to go out and get something like that, get another big fish, unless it is like a huge fish. And Jimmy Butler, for as big as he is, he's not going to come in and be what you need him to be next to Shea. I just don't see it happening on that Thunder roster. So those are 3 teams that I wanted to get out of the way really quickly. There are still 3 or 4 other teams that I have been paying attention to for this case. And there's some that I don't think will happen. There's 3 that I think are more likely than not to happen. So I'm going to eliminate one of the last. There's 4 teams left on my list. The 4th place team on my list in terms of landing Jimmy Butler is the Milwaukee Bucks. They would have to pull off some 4-for-1, 5-for-1, most likely a 3-team trade. You'd have to go get a team like the Pistons, a team like the Wizards involved in this with some salary dumping, getting guys like that. It's going to be very complicated for the Bucks to get it all sorted out. The Bucks also, as much as I think it would be beneficial for them to get a guy like Jimmy Butler, I don't see the Heat trading in the Eastern Conference if they can avoid it. right? This is a Heat team that plays the Bucks a lot in the playoffs. And if Jimmy Butler is going up against them, that just makes it even harder for the Heat to get rid of him. And this is not going to be one where they'll trade him because lack of suitors. I think there's going to be plenty of suitors out there that are very interested in getting the talents of Jimmy Butler. I just don't see it working out on the Bucks, although if there was one Eastern Conference team that might do it, it absolutely would be them. They're at number 4 on the list. At number 3, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. And this is a little bit out of left field, right? I haven't seen too much talk about the Memphis Grizzlies going and pursuing a trade for Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler would be great on that team. His mentality, his physicality matches well with that team. They've got a lot of expiring contracts, a lot of big contracts that they had to give out, and I know Jimmy Butler wants a big contract. I don't know if the Grizzlies would be the team that would be willing to give him a big contract if, in fact, he was traded there. So that's another thing that Jimmy Butler probably won't like about going to Memphis. If he wants to go to a winner, that's a good spot right there. That team that they're building, that culture that they're building over there in Memphis is really cool. It's really good. It's very young. And with Ja Morant at the center, I think it would be a great fit, honestly. I just don't know if Jimmy Butler would be happy with that fit, but they are a team that I could very easily see making a deal like this happen. Number 2 is the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors with their old roster, right? This, first of all, checks off the box of the timeline. That's one of the most important things that we're looking for when a team wants to trade for a guy like Jimmy Butler, an older, aging veteran who wants another contract. The Golden State Warriors might give it to him depending on how this season goes, but you pair him up with Steph Curry, with Draymond Green, you're going to have to give up some young assets, right? You're going to have to give up some guys that they really like. Hopefully, potentially, they can hold on to guys like Brandon Podjemski or Jonathan Kuminga, potentially both in a dream scenario. But this would be one where, again, if you're not getting rid of Steph Curry, if you're not getting rid of Draymond Greens, you're probably going to have to get rid of a guy like Andrew Wiggins. You're probably going to have to get rid of a guy like Dennis Schroeder. These guys that you just brought in, you're probably going to have to get rid of guys like that. This is a trade that I could see happening. They're number 2 on my list here for a reason, but it's going to be pretty expensive. The reason they're not number 1 is because there's one team that kind of just has a perfect scenario lined up for the Heat to make a trade, and that is the Phoenix Suns. I've seen a lot of discussion around the Phoenix Suns. They would love to go and get a guy like Jimmy Butler. They have a contract that they can basically just trade 1-for-1 in Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal played at Florida in college. I'm sure he wants to go to the Heat, a team that when he was with the Wizards demanding a trade or asking for a trade was one of those teams that was on his list for potential places that he would go to. Bradley Beal, not the same level as Jimmy Butler, but you can put him on there, be a 2 guard. He's an excellent scorer of the basketball. The Phoenix Suns also just moved him to the bench, which if they don't end up making this trade, I think is good for the long term of that team anyway. But Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal, obviously there's going to be a little bit more sweetness probably from the Phoenix Suns. They might have to throw in another player or a couple second-round picks, but that as the basic 1-for-1 deal, again, going to need a little bit more in there, but technically you could just do a 1-for-1. That's something that I'd take a look at, and that is my favorite deal as far as benefiting both the Heat and the Suns. That's one that I would look at, and that's my favorite team for Jimmy Butler to end up on after the trade deadline. But let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to baseball. Yet again, more news. A brand new blockbuster trade took place last night. We will talk about that. We'll talk about Corbin Burns, where he ended up, and what that means for the rest of the league. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.